Now, it's such a shame with Disenchanted, as it quite honestly and quite literally had the potential to be one of the best sequels that have been released in a long time, but unfortunately, it just does not live up to its potential. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Lifestyle Critic. I hope you're having a brilliant day. So in this video, we are going to be reviewing Disney's Disenchanted. Now, it's a really funny one with Disenchanted, as per my review for Enchanted, I absolutely loved that movie and I was so looking forward to watching Disenchanted, but it's just one of those classic examples of just having a bit of a lackluster sequel. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some redeeming moments in this film and there are some really cool moments as well. For example, the entire world turning into a little bit of a fairy tale, but unfortunately, it just doesn't rise to this brilliant potential and this awesome premise. And I also feel they were a little bit unsure about what to do with all of their characters, as that is such a crying shame, as the premise lent themselves to be able to do something really, really clever and really intriguing with all of the different characters, but they just went down a really conventional route that just wasn't that inspiring and really could have and should have just been so much better, and I'm going to be breaking it all down for you in this movie review. So the storyline in Disenchanted takes place 10 years after the events from the end of Enchanted, and Gazelle, Robert and Morgan aren't living their magical lives that they were in New York City, and so try to move to the suburbs to try to reignite this. But as they always say, you can't run away from your problems, and they have some brand new issues in this suburban area, and after a series of unfortunate events, Gazelle decides to use Andalasian magic and turns the entire suburban area into a living fairy tale. So this movie is less of a fish out of water tale like the first one was, and is more about appreciating what you had before and trying to go back to what you had before, with some magical consequences in there, of course. Now, from a positive point of view, I do absolutely think that the fact that everything in this area is turning into a living fairy tale is really, really wicked, and there are pockets of really, really cool moments. For example, references to beloved fairy tales, and everybody loves that Disney magic, and that is definitely here through and through, especially within this fairy tale world, and especially the consequences of what is happening to the 2D animated world in Andalasia, I do think is really, really clever. And of course, all of the charming aspects of the first film are definitely prevalent here as well. And on that point, all of the major studios are just loving the nostalgia boost that all of their projects are getting at the moment. And of course, Disenchanted is no different, and I do feel like they tap into nostalgia really, really nicely. And the thing that everybody also loved about Enchanted is that it threw back to the 2D animated times, and I feel like it's really nice and really charming to see all of those 2D animated sequences in this film too. And the issue that I had with Enchanted was it was such a brilliant film, but I just felt like the finale just was a bit wasted. Whereas this time, I do feel like they've learnt their lesson, and they have actually made a pretty emotional finale. However, now let's look at the negatives, and I have to pick up on that point. And whilst it is a really emotional finale, it's just over before you know it. And I just feel like they weren't that comfortable in terms of having such an emotional moment, and they just really wanted to quickly get back to their normal way of running this film. And it's just such a shame, as Pixar and Disney are so known and so beloved for their moments that really do pull on the heartstrings. And like I said, they had that, but they just wasted it. It was just over before you know it. And on that point, I just feel like this movie, for the most part, for the main part actually, is just so vanilla. I mean, it is okay to watch, but they just could have made it so much better. And it does in some ways feel like a bit of an SNL sketch, and it just feels really light. Whereas the first one was so fantastical, and it's just such a shame that they weren't able to get to those heights, as it just feels so limited in scale. And it's just such a shame, as turning everything, turning your entire universe and world into a fairy tale just could have been and should have been so much better. But I don't know if they were really targeting a younger audience and they didn't want to push it. Maybe that was the reason, but it's just such a shame, as I do feel like if they had pushed the premise, this movie could have been so much better. But you know, from a storyline's perspective, I have to say it's pretty average. So from a cast and characters point of view, Enchanted was really beloved because it had such a phenomenal cast. And once again, it does have a really, really good cast, but I do feel like they could have pushed their characters in the same way that they could have pushed their storyline so much better. So let's go through them one by one. So first up, of course, we have Amy Adams, who returns as the lead character of Gazelle, and she is such a hopeful, music-loving character, so she does feel very familiar, and I do think it's really clever as she has assimilated herself into the real world really, really effectively, while still not losing the core attributes of this character, which I do feel like is a really, really cool thing. And I'm not going to spoil too much, but she does become a bit of an evil stepmother in the whole fairy tale landscape, so I thought that was really, really clever. And Amy Adams, once again, does lead this movie and production really, really well. Next up, let's talk about Patrick Dempsey, who is returning as the Robert character, and I loved the yin and yang aspects of Gazelle and Robert in the first Enchanted movie, as Gazelle was just such a positive and hopeful ray of light, whereas Robert, by contrast, was a bit cynical and was a divorce attorney. So I absolutely loved all of their different perspectives and different outlooks on life. Whereas this time, it seemed as if they didn't know what to do with the Robert character, as he has a couple of frustrations in terms of having such a long commute from the suburbs to New York City. And then, in the fairy tale world, he's just a bit of a wannabe prince, and he's just not that good at it. And I was just like, what are you doing with the Robert character? And very similarly, James Marsden, you can just tell that from a production point of view, they only had James Marsden, for about a week, as all of his sequences are so short, and they just really don't push this character to the length that they could do, as I feel like King Edward, who has taken on the king position after his mother obviously died and he was a prince in the first movie and now he's a king, they just could have done so much more with that. And I feel like James Marsden is such a comedic, brilliant actor, as he has most recently showed in the first two Sonic live-action movies, so it's just such a shame that they weren't able to do more with James Marsden. However, instead of that, they have done a lot more with Idina Menzel, who's a lot better used, and I thought it was really clever actually how Gazelle can actually talk to her a lot more, as obviously her and Nancy had a bit of a troubled relationship in the first Enchanted movie, whereas this time, because Nancy understands the real world, she can really sympathize and empathize with Gazelle, and can actually give us some really good advice. And of course, she has got her own song in this movie, because of course she sings so many brilliant songs in Frozen, which is really, really cool. But it's just such a shame with what they did with James Marsden, King Edward's character, as he could have been so much better, but they just made him a bit of a laughingstock and a joke, but just not in a good way. Next up, we have Morgan, who is now grown up, and she is definitely the second lead after Gazelle's character, and I think it's really, really clever, as in this fairy tale world, she is the stepdaughter to this evil somewhat character, and they really do play into that really, really nicely. And of course, she has got her own romantic love interest, even though that romantic love interest, you don't really get to have any development with him at all. We've also got Maya Rudolph, who is playing another villainous character in this movie, and I thought it was really, really clever how we have this evil character and the evil stepmother, and all of their sequences were really, really cool. I did miss the evil queen, if I'm being honest, from the first Enchanted movie, and I do feel like Maya Rudolph's character definitely could have done so much more, and definitely could have been the big bad, both from a normal reality point of view, as well as from a fairy tale point of view, as they did make this character into a lot more of a panto villain instead of a really epic fairy tale villain. And we of course have Pip, who is back narrating this movie this time, and he is really, really cool. Pip is such a wicked character, and I thought it was really clever what they do with him in a fairy tale world as well. And of course, like we also see in other fairy tale movies, we have a talking scroll and some other talking objects as well, which I do think is really, really clever. But like I just said, from a cast and characters point of view, even though the cast were spot on, they definitely could have and should have done so much more with their characters. So from a visuals point of view, Disenchanted is a little bit mixed, as on the one hand, all of the fairy tale aspects look really, really cool, all of the musical numbers look really, really cool, and none of them are that memorable, but it is really cool that they did continue it in this modern age. And of course, all of the 2D animation sections look really, really cool, and this film also does tap into a lot of magic, and all of that is really, really brilliant. I would say though, they definitely could have made it a lot more grander in scale, as you can really feel that all of their production sets were pretty limited, and there are certain moments where you can just tell it's so apparent that they are just in front of a green screen. Most notably, there's a scene between King Edward and Robert, and it may be because they didn't have access to James Marsden for that sequence, maybe it was during the reshoot, and they were just having both of these actors just in front of a green screen, but they could have and should have just done so much more with that. But that being said, all of the costumes do look really, really cool, and of course everybody just loves the 2D animation sequences in Enchanted, and they did retain them really, really nicely in this film. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more in Andalasia, but that being said, from a visuals point of view, they definitely could have made this movie so much slicker. So from a comparisons point of view, unfortunately, I don't think this movie is as good as Enchanted, even though Enchanted was released so long ago. And from a Disney live action sequel point of view, I way preferred Maleficent to Disenchanted, and to other live action remakes. I think this movie is not as good as Aladdin, but I do actually think it's a lot stronger than Dumbo. So overall, with Disenchanted, you know, it is really nice to see a continuation from the beloved first Enchanted movie, and to see what are these characters up to, and to see another new adventure with them as well. But like I just said in this review, they definitely could have and should have just pushed it so much more, as they just had the potential to just make this absolutely incredible. But you know, that being said, it is a pretty watchable movie, and if you are after a bit of a nostalgia gate, then you are going to have a good time with this movie. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear what you thought of Disenchanted, so please let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in my next video.